Hey guys, it's Davis Bass with the Gulf Coast Vacation Rentals. I had gotten a lot of feedback from some of our owners in various industries and markets about kind of what our outlook is for the 2023 season. I know a lot of people have heard on the news and people throwing things around about a recession. What does that mean for us? Are we prepared for it? And if we see a recession, we can discuss how not only to survive it, but how to thrive during it. So let's get started. All right. So what was the problem? So we know what changed. It's no secret that the global economy has been pretty volatile since the onset of COVID-19. In the United States alone, mortgage rates dropped to a historic low in 2020, in March of 2020, to 2.65%, and have since climbed to a 20-year high of 7.08% as of November 10th of 2022. You know the story. Initially, lockdowns and health concerns, they negatively impacted vacation rental demand. Then travel restrictions relaxed for Florida, all while mortgage rates remained below 4%. This drastically reversed demand, and we looked at the 2021 year as a banner year. It was a banner year for all states, not just Florida, but as you will see that some of the travel restrictions, as they were relaxed, many rentalpreneurs, if you will, entrepreneurs that wanted to rent their properties were earning record revenue thanks to eager travelers who spent most of that 2020 locked inside of their homes. As a result, many aspiring hosts that maybe were not in the vacation rental world were also motivated to join the rental game in 2021. This trend of supply growth is still in full effect. There are 23% more active rental listings today than this time last year. For these reasons, many hosts experienced lower occupancy rates in 2022 versus 2021. So how does all that happen? What does all that mean? So just some of the numbers there that I broke out were that we had a record-breaking demand actually in 2022 this year. Most people will say, wait a second, how do we beat our 2021 year? And in Florida, how do we beat our 2020 year? With a couple different things come into effect there, but we'll discuss a little bit those as we get kind of further on. But that record-breaking demand, there were more nights booked through the major channels, Airbnb and VRBO in our area. There was 9% more rental demand in 2022. Unfortunately, that demand was outpaced by the supply of new homes that came into the market or new homes that came onto rental programs as a result of them purchasing them during this period. So what are we worried about? What's kind of into that future? You're hearing a lot about it on the news. Is the US is at a 50% risk of falling into a recession, and Europe is closer to a 60 or 70%. So that means less discretionary income if that were to take place, and obviously more price conscious buyers. We know that a recession technically means that more than one quarter where you have a negative or the same GDP growth as prior quarters. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's impending doom, but it does signal where we have to be a little bit more conscious and understanding that the buyers and people and the renters that are coming into our market, they're going to be looking a little bit more into this pricing, and it's not going to be as much about what is there available, what's left over for me to book. It's going to be a little bit more competitive, more properties in our market. So it's going to be a little bit tougher as we get into 2023, but we do have some solutions for that. So if you're not prepared correctly, the combination of these outside economic factors could harm or even kill your vacation rental future. So be vigilant and you will thrive. So number one, we got to understand the data. These are the challenges that we're facing. We got to understand the data. We have to understand that short-term rentals, just like most industries, they have economic cycles. Understand that our hospitality lodging cycle and where you are in it is going to be very determinant on how you market and how you price your property to make sure that you're successful. It seems a little complicated, but it will prepare you for success regardless of where you are in that cycle. This video is not only pertinent to today, but we'll talk a little bit more to the full cycle where you could use this video for the next 10, 12, 15 years into the next economic cycle. So you providing unique value. Why do I put this as a challenge? Well, providing unique value used to be something that we talked about and were some buzzwords inside of the vacation rental industry. Providing value is that ultimately, providing something where somebody says that the value was higher than what I paid, what the price was. Again, we'll talk a little bit more to this and why this is important as we go a little bit further. But if you can show that your value is better than your price in the sales process or marketing process, you've eliminated 95% of the competition. So what do your specific guests want most of your property? They want you to provide value. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that is. And pricing competitively. This is very, very important. The last 12 years, we've looked at pricing. Even since 2012, we've had a steady increase in average daily rates for individual properties. We've also seen an increase in that occupancy. So value can only be discussed once pricing is competitive, right? Because if you outprice yourself out of the market, then your customers aren't even getting a chance to click through and look at your property to decide if there's enough value to go ahead and book that property. You end up not making the cut. So we do have to make sure that our pricing is competitive. So we end up in those top 5, top 3 properties on somebody's list. And at that point, we can sell our value and market our value to be over and above what that cost is. And that's our job. So Airbnb saw 1,500 new homes added on 30A in the last 2 years alone. Why, this isn't just properties that are just now getting onto the rental program that might have been second homes, but the majority of these are brand new construction homes. So why would somebody go in and book your home that maybe isn't new construction or maybe it hasn't been built or renovated in the last year or two? Why would they book your home over a new home? We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Okay, so number one is don't panic. Let's understand the data. We talked about that just a little bit ago, but we'll go a little bit more in depth here. So STR, short-term rentals demand increased from 2021 to 2022. We talked a little bit about that, that it increased, that demand, number of nights booked increased 9% over the entire United States. It actually increased very steadily in our area, 7 to 8%, but still that demand did increase number of nights booked in 2022 over 2021. Short-term rental supply, another number that's very important. The number of available rentals that are in your market compared from 2021 to 2022. This increased, unfortunately, and increased more than the increase in demand, which leads to our next number of a lower occupancy. 66% of vacation rentals have less occupancy in 2022 over 2021. They had less occupancy. 67% of those same rentals had increased daily rates though. So although you might lose 2 or 3 weeks of bookings from your 2021 year, you were able to increase your pricing anywhere between 5, 10, and 15% with some of the inflation that was able to kind of balance that out a little bit. What does that mean across our entire the entire 30A market? And this is the entire Gulf Coast really, but the 30A market, Panama City Beach, Destin, and Pensacola Beach are all markets we monitor very, very closely. But what it showed is that less than 50% of rentals increased in revenue from 2021 to 2022. That's a mind-blowing number because you see those rates have increased, but that decrease in occupancy means that there were some people that got scared a little bit early and maybe dropped pricing. And then there was also those people that priced themselves out of the market and weren't fluctuating their rates to kind of keep up with demand. So both of those things are hugely important when it comes to making sure that you're locking in that revenue and making sure that you're booking out for 65 to 75% of the year to make sure that you're making the most amount of money possible for that. A little bit more detail there, but that kind of explains that, in actuality, the demand was stronger last year. The declining occupancy is instead caused by the increasing supply, and understanding how those two variables are very important when you're looking at occupancy rate. it will really help you understand a little bit more of what the next year brings, the next 5 years or 10 years. And we'll talk a little bit more to that cycle. So here's the lodging industry business cycle. If you understand it, you will thrive. We talked about it earlier, pre-COVID. The short-term rental industry was last in the stability phase in 2010. That stability phase, you see it kind of up there at the top. It's important to remember that lodging lags other economic cycles, and travel is one of the last segments to recover. But this makes it even easier to predict since we can follow those other industries. I have a lot of owners that are in the mortgage industry. I've got some real estate brokers, some real estate team leaders that are owners of ours. And all of those people were showing signs and giving signs to myself and my team very early on in 2022 that said, hey, we need to kind of start looking at this stuff. And as soon as they started throwing up those yellow flags, that raised that yellow flag for myself as well, and meant that we had to go ahead and start making changes so that we can make sure that our properties are thriving during this time that might not be as productive as past years. So during this phase of recovery, growing occupancy rates push up the average daily rate and profit margins. The big thing there as you're looking at it is as your occupancy declines, your daily rate is eventually going to start dropping so that you can keep that 60 to 65% occupancy. No matter what those prices are doing, that number between 55, 65, and 75% are kind of the difference between my second homeowners at 55% occupancy, the owners that are kind of in the middle that have investment properties but still enjoy it a couple weeks out of the year at that 65%. And then my primary investors that are anywhere between 75 and 85% occupied for the whole year. So as those occupancy rates start to decline, you have to start adjusting that daily rate. Now, we have already started doing this a little bit, and that's really where we were increasing that daily rate for 2022, but we didn't have as high of occupancy. So now that we see that drop in occupancy, we've got to adjust that daily rate to make sure that we're staying at that 60+% occupancy. So again, where are we here? So, we see that, here is that lodging declines leads other sectors. That actually lodging decline, it lags the other sectors here, which is a typo, but it lags other sectors. So we're seeing this right here is that occupancy declines and ADR follows. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily although these are separated into quarters, if you will, one quarter being here, one quarter being here, the third quarter being here, and the fourth quarter being here. These don't actually represent, although a 10-year business cycle is pretty standard, these don't actually represent a certain amount of time. It just represents what happens and can give you a little bit more insight into that. For all the pessimists that are out there, it's also important to note that being at the peak of the growth stage doesn't necessarily mean an immediate decline. In fact, in 2015 to early 2020, these were all peak times. So you see this here, and of course you see Europe will come a little bit before us. United States kind of lags behind, but very similar on this side. Europe will probably lead in that recession category, and then the United States, depending on how bad it is, the United States will lag behind them a little bit. So remember that regardless of where you are in this cycle, as long as you know what's coming, you can prepare and act accordingly and be profitable. So that there is good news in this. A little bit more detail in this, and you can take a screenshot of this and we can kind of discuss this if you'd like to a little bit more in depth. But this has a lot of good information. There is some additional info on here that we could go over in detail. Okay, so we talked about value earlier. That's a word that gets tossed around a lot. You have a value meal at McDonald's. You have great value is the slogan for Walmart. When people talk about value, what does value mean? To me, value means, as you're kind of looking at it, value is what you're getting for the price you're paying. Did you feel like what you received was a better value than what you paid? What you received was a better service, the product, whatever it was, there was a expectation that was set, and that you not only met that expectation, but you surpassed it. And the price that you charged for it, it also surpasses that as well. So there's a couple factors in here, but big thing we want to point out on this is when AirDNA, which is a very, they're very connected to Airbnb. They've got a lot of information as it relates to occupancy across the United States and the world. But it also gives a lot more information into what are the things that drive bookings and how are you going to, and as Airbnb adjusts their policies and changes what they do, as the market and economic factors change, what are the things that change in a renter's mind that makes them want to book your property? So you can see a couple of those listed here, but the top two there are location and then price value for the money. And what you'll see here too is that you'll see positive reviews as a close number 3. But if you see how much it drops off and how close it is to the rest of these items here, you'll see that weirdly enough, reviews used to kind of drive the market. And that was what Airbnb and VRBO used to figure out where you were going to populate in the search rankings. If you had 10 5-star reviews, you're up at the top of the rankings. If you have a couple 3-star reviews, maybe one 1-star review and a couple 5 stars, you're going to be further down on that list. Well, those positive reviews, although they're still very important, they're number 3. The price and value for money has been a big driver of the bookings over the last 6 months. We'll talk a little bit more to how Airbnb is changing their policies. So we just talked about the new value score on Airbnb being more important than reviews. Now I'm going to repeat that. And for those in the back, is that value score is now more important than reviews. In November of this year, Airbnb announced a shift in the ranking algorithm, prioritizing this value score over reviews. Now, what does this mean? Well, if they're prioritizing a value score over reviews, then, and that reviews are very important, then what does that mean? Well, when they changed over and they stopped doing just reviews, they actually started populating a couple different categories that they didn't tell you were ranking metrics, where you populate in that search when somebody searches for your neighborhood, where you rank on that list. But the biggest thing was they not only wanted that 5-star review or whatever star the review would be, but as soon as you clicked on a star, the number of stars, it brought you to a second page and it had you rank 4 or 5 different items and it's changed 4 or 5 different items that were a little bit more in depth and kind of subcategories of what it was involved in that 5-star review. So what are those items? Number 1 was communication. That's one of the very top ones that are on the list, and cleaning. Those are also on the list. Now, those are very standard. Cleaning is definitely one of the top reasons people write reviews, and the top reasons why you get negative reviews is from a substandard cleaning or something that happens in the cleaning process. But those 2 factors, very important. But they added the third one in there, and it was a value score. Now, nobody really knew what it meant at the time, but they had value score in there. And then they added the last one is ease of access into the property itself, which again is important. But we do provide remote locks. Most people do provide remote locks and keyless entry, which makes that a little bit easier. So let's discuss the value piece of it, because it's now jumped reviews in those ranking metrics. So if your properties were receiving a perfect 5 out of 5 score, and these were on a 5 scale, so ease of access, communication, cleanliness, and the value score were a 0 to a 5 or 1 to 5. So if you received a 5 out of 5 score for value, it wasn't necessarily a good thing. And this was something they didn't really tell us, but I started to understand it a little bit more. But it meant the guest found your listing to be an extremely good value or deal for the money. Translation, you were underpriced. They're making this now the new goal. So what does that mean? Why would they do that? Because, and I've got a couple different theories on it, but you kind of take your own guesses of what you think it is. But they look at this and say, okay, well, reviews are important, but if you look at value actually probably wraps up reviews inside of it, right? Because it's what was the expectation? what did you meet, exceed, or not exceed that expectation? And then as a result of you not exceeding it, meeting it, or exceeding it, was the value worth the service you received? And so it is a little confusing, but it makes sense if you think about it. Is now, if I'm looking at something, I say, man, that was a good deal. If I'm looking at and saying, hey, well, we really want to improve our rental revenue numbers, we're really trying to do this, that's all well and good. And we can get 5-star reviews, even if they feel like they didn't necessarily get a good value, because the property was very clean. We were very communicative and answered any questions or issues that they have. We were communicative. And the third thing, making sure that their check-in and check-out was easy, and they had a very good experience. Good weather, you name it, or reasons why we get negative reviews. I could do an entire webinar on of guests that have utilized things that are not under our control to give us interesting reviews. So, but this value score, this is going to be what drives Airbnb. Well, why would they do that? Why would they change it from reviews to value? Well, I think they saw kind of the writing, on the wall a little bit. They were looking at, okay, if there's an economic downturn, reviews are going to be important, but at the end of the day, you're going to have a much more price conscious buyer. We need to start prioritizing this value score. And you really started to see some changes, even in the last 2 or 3 weeks, of where properties are populating inside of that value score. So we'll talk a little bit more of how this is going to affect us and what we can do with it a little bit later. So value score, more important than reviews, part 2. So when Airbnb sees this recession in the future, it's adapted to reflect the new normal of that price conscious buyer. This doesn't mean that reviews are no longer important. Value takes into account not only the guest experience, their review, but what was provided for the price, and that the guests feel like they got a good deal. The main recommendation here is to keep a close eye on how your value rating overlays with your other primary metrics: reviews, the conversion percentages, and service fees paid. Because we know at the end of the day that although value score is very important, the amount of money that is being paid to the corporation at the end of the day is going to be what really is always in their purview for making sure that those listings pop to the top. Conversion percentage. This is something they tracked on Airbnb and VRBO for some time now, but they never really have said that it's a ranking metric. I do foresee the sales process and conversion percentage of people that have viewed your ad, as those will into the future, those will start becoming more important, and they will start being a ranking metric as well. Just a point of interest. Currently we have a 2.8% conversion rate of people that have searched for a property. They have seen our property as they're scrolling through, from them scrolling through and just seeing it on in that search panel to clicking through and actually booking our property. We are actually 65% ahead of the competition. That number we pulled yesterday from Airbnb, they said that was one of our best metrics that we had, was that conversion percentage. And I do foresee that being a ranking metric here in the near future. So we are going to have to sit and understand a little bit more about how this value rating actually is going to affect those ranking metrics. And we'll continue to watch that for you guys and give you some updates as we see changes move along. They tend to do them slower and roll them out a little bit slower over a couple months before making a full change. All right, so how do you become profitable in 2023? We talked about what's going to happen. We talked about a recession, but is there a way of actually being profitable in a market that has somewhat of a downturn? So let's discuss a little bit of what the property manager is responsible for. And some of you might be managing your own properties. Some of you guys might be with another property manager, whether they're a small company or a large company. This will give you a little bit more insight into what to expect from your property manager or from yourself. And if you don't think that you are being provided this, or you don't think that you can provide this, that we sit down and talk a little bit more, and we can give you a little bit more information, maybe to help you out maybe to kind of get you pointed in the right direction, or if you're looking to possibly turn over a rental, and we would definitely be interested in taking on a new rental, a quick email. I've got some contact information towards the end of this PowerPoint that you guys can look in, and we can touch base from there. All right, so what can the property manager or the owner, if you're self-managing, what is your responsibility? The number one responsibility is increasing the level of service through convenient communication. There's a lot packed into that, so I'm going to unpack it a little bit. These guests, they want to feel comfortable addressing issues, right? If you're not communicating with them in the avenue with which they're comfortable with, then that person is not going to reach out, or they're not going to feel comfortable letting you know there's an issue in the property, or letting you know that they have an issue with the thunderstorm that hit, or they have an issue with the construction that's going on at the neighborhood pool. There's a lot of things that they want to reach out and talk about. But if you're not opening yourself up for them to be able to address that to you via email or text message or phone call, then that avenue ends up becoming a review, or it affects that value score. Again, you can provide value with not affecting the price at all. Just a little bit more higher level of service is going to be able to give you that value over and above what the price is that they're paying. Convenient communication. What does that mean? Convenient communication. Everybody now has kind of moved to text messages. You're having to get two-factor authentications to get into your bank account. And so most people, although we have tried our best to get in touch with people, whether it's an email, back in the day, a fax, sending a text message, a phone call, smoke signals, you try every method possible to find out what it is, how it is that guest communicates the best, so that you can make sure you're communicating to them the way that they want to, so they're providing you as much feedback that you can respond to as soon as possible. So again, there's a couple different mediums that you can use there, but what we found is the most successful over the last 2 to 3 years is those direct text messages, and we're sending about 3 text messages minimum to guests throughout their stay to kind of check in and make sure everything looks good. Obviously, we're not looking for a response if they're enjoying themselves on the beach, but it opens that door and makes them feel comfortable about giving us some feedback, even if it's just minor constructive criticism. It opens that door. So second piece is market each property efficiently and responsibly. This is another real big piece that we've seen a lot recently. We mentioned that in 2021, you had a lot of vacation rentalpreneurs that got into the market because they saw how vacation rentals were not susceptible to market conditions, and they saw the growth in that. They saw that they were COVID proof. So what into the future, they wanted to get a piece of that. So marketing each property efficiently and responsibly. Number one, when you're talking about value, the value starts in the marketing phase. Value starts the first time that you start communicating with a guest. So when you're marketing a property, we might have taken pictures for a property. Let's say that we've had, a property on our program for 3 or 4 years. They've done some updates to the property, changed out some furniture, replaced some bedding, changed out, some pillows and throw pillows, and maybe even changed out a couch or an appliance to kind of match everything, or maybe redone flooring and some of the bigger items, renovated rooms, renovated kitchens and bathrooms. Marketing each property efficiently and responsibly means that we are setting the expectation and marketing exactly what we're currently providing. Now, some owners would be like, well, no, I want to put my best foot forward. That's all well and good, and we definitely want to put our best foot forward, and good pictures and quality copy, marketing copy for your property's description are very important. They're very important. But some property managers can get where their marketing team outpaces their operations team. And what that does is it sets an expectation for that operations team that they cannot hit. And once you set an expectation that you cannot hit, you take a knock on your value score, you'll take a knock on your reviews, And it might not affect you this year, or it might not affect you over the next 2 years, but what does a 1, 2, 3, or 4 star, 1, 2, 3, or 4 value score, what is the long-term effect of that over a 4 or 5 year period? That number is really hard to come up with. So just something to think about is that marketing each property efficiently, got to have a good, you have to be able to market at the lowest cost per booking possible, but you also have to make sure that you are marketing in a above board manner, making sure guests know exactly what they're getting into. Because once an expectation is set, even if you set it a little bit more conservatively, that gives you so much room to improve on that expectation. And then that's where that value really starts to supersede that price. Become the one-stop shop for all things vacation rentals. Guests are getting to the point where, although they used to, hey, I just want a beach house. It doesn't even have to have air. 20, 30 years ago, doesn't even have to have air conditioning. Just give me a beach house, give me a couple beach towels and, a beach chair, and I'm good to go. They're happy, and you get a 5-star review. Well, that's not what we're looking at anymore. And really, it's not necessarily that the guest expectations have changed, but the competition is that much higher. So if your competition is out there providing, they're providing bicycles and a golf cart, and they're providing, a beach chair availability so that they don't have to run down at 6 a.m. and go reserve a spot on the beach. All of these things, people are starting to add the value there is starting to multiply, looking for an all-inclusive vacation inside of a vacation rental. So that's something to think about. What are those things that you could add to your property today that maybe some of your competitors are using, but what are some of those things you could add today that has an immediate return on investment, and you were able to provide that complete experience versus them have to go out to a vendor, finding bicycles, finding a golf cart, paying the peak amount because they waited till the week of to book it. Guests are willing to pay for that convenience. If it all comes in one package, they're willing to pay an extra 5, 10, even 20% more for the convenience of not having to deal with that. So provide all of those things that you would want when you come down to vacation. And I promise you, those are the things that these guests are looking for. Again, the last piece is ensure each property ranks in the top 5% of these categories for competitive properties. So for all the properties that you're competing against, and we usually have about 20 or 25 per property on our program, amenities is the number one thing. We just talked about those amenities. What are those things that you could add to the property that sets yourself apart and provides value? The second is making sure our pricing is right. We'll talk a little bit more to pricing here in just a minute, but the pricing is very important. If you don't put yourself in the top 5% of competitively priced properties, then you don't end up in that top 5 or top 3 properties as they're going to choose the property that they end up booking. You don't even make the cut there. So what does that mean for you across the entire year? It really doesn't affect you much during season, from June 1st to the end of July, but where it really hurts you is the shoulder seasons. And that's where you really make your money. Shoulder seasons is where every good vacation rental makes their profits. So, and then the last piece, the renovations and updates are always on the radar to continue to compete with top properties to attain that top price. If you want to be able to rent your property at the top price, we're now competing with those 1,500 new homes that have come on the market they are brand spanking new. They've gone in there and completely updated and renovated. They've gone in and added a pool to the property. They've gone in and they might have gutted it all the way down to the studs and renovated everything on the inside. New air conditioning, new tankless hot water heaters. There's a lot of things that are inside of that could show you where the return on investment really starts to make sense. And there's some really small investments you can make that really have a high ROI. And I'd love to sit down and talk with you and give you a little more detail on that. All right, so perceived value is determined by service and price. Very similar to the last page was the property manager's responsibility. If you manage your property yourself, you actually have both of these responsibilities, but this is actually the property owner's responsibility if you have a property manager. Revisiting those amenities, we just talked about that to make sure they're attractive to potential guests. Are there any amenities popular for your area that are easy to add? Small updates can go a long way, like access to an inflatable paddleboard, offering additional sports channels like Red Zone or one of the FIFA networks. Being able to access to guests don't really want to miss those favorite teams. They also don't want to have to go outside of the house to be able to find some of these amenities, and can be kind of difficult during season to get these, as most of them are rented out. Using amenities to make you stand out. These amenities that used to stand out were things that you probably are currently on your description, right? Like a killer backyard, or you're providing free bicycles, or you're providing a free golf cart or an ice maker. You know, all of those things used to be, that's what made the difference and put you in that top 5%. With this additional competition that's in the market, we've got to go look deeper and harder at what do our guests actually need? What are they booking every single time they stay at our property? What are they spending that extra money on that I could go and buy and make a return on that investment? And then it also attracts more potential renters because it has everything that they're looking to do. So staying in a very niche environment and making sure that in that niche that you are the best, most attractive property, or at least in that top 5%. One thing that we've started doing with a couple of our properties, and this is something that, you know, will continually be a driver of bookings as we get into a lower economic cycle, is millennials really, and even not just millennials, but even the parents and grandparents of millennials, they love Facebook. That's what keeps them connected to everybody that's in their sphere. You know, and so being able to provide something that maybe has, you know, is a mural or a decorative wall space that maybe has a some marketing on it that has like the name of the property, maybe has a hashtag on it for your property, which is a searchable term on either Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram that helps people find your property if they've never been to our area before. But having a unique hashtag, so you can go back and see all the people that have stayed at your property and look at their pictures and enjoy those as well. Lots of people will click into those to really understand what is it that was provided, and to get a very honest feedback from somebody who's actually stayed at the property. Again, as the property owner, wanting to stay in the top 5% of pricing, and this is going to be something that an owner directly affects, because they are the ones that typically set what is that minimum night pricing. And something that when we were at our VRMA conference this past month, that they let us know is that lowering your price by 5% for off season could mean 20% or more in rental revenue. Well, what does that mean? Well, you know, you might be very, very close to the threshold of what you need to be able to book for 30, 40, 50% of off season. But because you decided not to price competitively and adjust your price dynamically, that 5% increase ends up shaving 20% off of your bottom line from the revenue off that top line. And that could look like to somebody, whether an owner or a property manager, as if, oh, I'm not providing enough value. When in fact, if you would have dropped it $50, $100 a night, even $25 a night during off season, that would have put you into a category in that top 5% to be able to compete. And that 5% discount provides you 20% more in revenue. And if you ask me, that is worth the payoff on that one for sure. And then renovations and updates, always on the radar to compete with those top properties. Everybody wants to know, every repeat guest that has stayed at your property and enjoyed it and given a 5-star review, they love your property as it is. But the first thing that they ask us is, has anything changed? Have they updated anything in the property? First thing that they ask. So if we always have something that we can bring to their attention since the last time that they stayed, that's a renovation or an update or things that, or an amenity that we've added, that increases that value. They already got a good experience because they gave us a 5-star review before. They know that any additional value is going to be worth the price that we have that we have on that property for that week. So something to stay in front of. So how do you do this? What if you're going to drop the demand and the average daily rate drops, but we want to continue to increase the occupancy? How do you do that? If there's less travelers out there, how do you find those travelers? Here at Live the Gulf Coast, we are uniquely qualified as a marketer because we have some avenues through a real estate website that we've had for over 12 years. It's the #3 real estate website, privately owned real estate website in Northwest Florida. Is thebeaches360.com. And using a lot of the information and data that we've gotten, which equals to be over 100,000 plus leads that have either stayed with us at our properties, were guests of ours. They have inquired about a property and they've given their email address and phone number, or that they were one of the 75,000+ leads that we have that are from that real estate website. I look at real estate leads and say, what is the best vacation rental lead you can possibly have? I think it's somebody that's more of a tire kicker, somebody just looking into the market. That is probably the absolute best person to have come down and visit to understand what the market looks like. And we have been able to utilize that very efficiently and been able to market for one of the lowest costs per booking of any property management company on 38. Again, this using those 100,000 leads, Facebook and Instagram and Google give you a way of being able to create an audience or a group of people that look very similar to the 100,000 leads that we have. So we can increase that number. What if we want 2, 3, 4% of what Facebook has? We can increase that audience up to 10 million people. We found that sweet spot to be that 2.4 million plus people, and we'll show you a little bit more to that of some of the results we've gotten in that marketing. So demographics and targeted marketing. Another piece of having two websites that generate leads for a very similar clientele is that we can utilize all the data that Google Analytics provides us, and we can use this to start targeting guests that maybe have stayed at our property or maybe are very similar to guests that have stayed at our property. And what are those things that they do at home? What are those things that are their hobbies? What are those things that they are purchasing online? All of these things are very important when you're trying to close somebody as an online lead. One of those things, and I'll kind of go back to this a little bit, but as we're looking at these different kind of in-market categories, these are things that allow us not only to figure out who is staying at our properties, but we can also take that and extrapolate that to who is going to be staying at our properties and who is going to be those repeat guests. How do we get them back in the fold? You can learn a lot by what are the other things that they're concerned with. So one of the most important things, and this is something that just popped up on our list, and this has not been populated on our list since 2012, is this shoppers and bargain hunters right here at the bottom. So that's something to look at. Is that is starting to become something that people are looking at. Although we don't really want the bargain hunters, we want those value buyers. Just know that this is reflective of what our market is moving to. All right, so efficient online marketing. We talked earlier about spending the least amount of dollars with the most amount of results. You're looking at an ad over here on the right side of the page that was an ad that we put up. We put up an ad as a part of our blast off program for new properties that come on our program. And this is one that had some really good results. We spent about $200 initially on this ad. We spend about $500 across all of the different platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Google. So we do break it up a little bit, but this is just a really good example that a lot of people can understand, with most people having Facebook or knowing a little bit about it. So right at $200 that we had invested into this ad, we had over 4,100 likes on this property or on this ad. We had 128 comments and 196 shares. Now, what does that tell you? What does that mean? Well, you say, Davis, that doesn't mean money. That doesn't mean a booking. Well, in contrast, we actually generated 3 different bookings just from this ad alone. Not only did we generate 3 bookings, we ended up generating about 14 different leads for this property. And I would love to kind of go into these comments a little bit, but the past owner of this property that owned this property in the 1950s themselves and a lot of their family members started commenting with stories, and they were they were kind of mind blown that this property popped up in their news feed on their Facebook, because they've never been to our website before. They've never signed up on our real estate website before, but as a result of our very efficient marketing, they ended up seeing this property. Very similarly, you're probably on your phone sometimes and you mention something about, oh man, I really need a new Keurig. And as soon as you say that word Keurig, you end up with 1,000 Amazon ads and all these ads that are pushing you to buy a Keurig. And you say, well, how does that happen? Very similarly, we use that information and how they gather that. It is a little bit beyond me, but through all the microphones and computers and phones that we have on us at all times, Big Brother's always listening. So, as much as I don't like Big Brother, it also, if we're not utilizing him to be successful, then, we're probably underperforming for our clients. So this is very cool. We actually were able to add those 14 leads, and we've been following up with those leads for 2023 bookings. So to be able to have 3 bookings out of it and generate 14 really quality leads, this is one of the most successful ads that we've had this year. But all are very similar. We usually have over 1,000 likes, usually have over 50 comments, and usually have over 50 shares. So, efficient online marketing, more revenue and less cost. This is a little example that I like to bring up. If your property manager has $3 in their pocket, they were their management fee, let's say, made them $3 from a rental. They're going to divide that up: $1 for operations, $1 for marketing, and $1 to take home as profit, or to be able to pay their own bills. If rentals do slow down and this drops to $2, what do you think that property managers will cut first? Well, they're probably not going to cut out their take-home money, right? They still got to pay their bills. They're probably not going to cut out their operations, although that they might cut out a little bit of their operations, not inspect as much, maybe not, be at the property doing maintenance as much, not following up with communicating with the owner as much, cutting some of their reservationists. They might do a little bit of that, but the first thing that they're going to drop is their marketing. Absolutely. So if we see an economic downturn, and you have these people that have never marketed outside of VRBO and Airbnb for the last 5, 6, 7 years, which has been very possible to be successful and just market on those channels, those people are going to have to figure out a way to start generating bookings outside of those channels, because they will no longer be profitable, and all that money they're paying in service fees could be going to your bottom line and could be coming to your bank account. So when bookings are hard to come by, you want someone that can continue to market on a leaner budget. Live the Gulf Coast has continually outpaced and outmarketed competition for over 7 years. Just some cost per click numbers. If you're kind of a data nerd like me, the cost per click, and that's clicking into this, whether they liked it, they commented, or shared, the cost per click on this was 13 cents. So that gives you an idea. Most ads are going to be somewhere in that $1, $2, $3 per click range. We were at 13 cents for this ad. So we were very efficient, and this is something that I love talking about. So if you want some more information on that, please let me know. All right. So what are the things that you say, Davis, I've heard all this, I understand it, but what can I do today? What is something I can do right now that is going to make sure that my business is successful in 2023? Number one is you've got to treat your vacation rental as a business and not a hobby. I say that to a lot of my owners. So some of my owners have probably heard that a lot, is we've got to look at historical numbers to know where we're going, but we also have to have some idea, like the graph that I showed a little bit earlier, had to have some idea of what we're looking at into the future as well. So knowing what your actual rental revenue is, knowing what your actual expenses are, knowing what your actual dollar and bottom line is once you paid out all of your expenses for the year, all of that stuff is very important. And once you have all of that information, then we can take that and use that as a foundation to build a better business. And we can use that information to make sure you're improving on numbers and to give you the metrics to show you that you're doing better this year than you were last year, but how? You want to know how. So treating it as your rental as a business and not a hobby. it being a business, you got to know what are your debits, what are your credits, what are your credits. And if it's a hobby, those are things that you involve yourself in because you want to involve yourself in them. A business is something that you go to and you look to turn a profit. Looking to turn your vacation rental, as making sure that you're turning a profit, will also ensure that you're able to come down and enjoy your vacation rental for those 2 or 3 weeks out of the year and not feel like you're taking money away from your business, and you know that you're making you are making money in your cash flow in the property. Take great vacation rental photos. Our current photographer that we use for Live the Gulf Coast, he's been featured in Southern Living. He's got a lot in Architectural Digest. Very, very sharp attention to detail, making sure that the property is not oversold for what it is, like we talked before. Wide angle lenses and all of those tend to distort some of the features and can set that expectation a little bit higher. Then maybe you have a little bit more space than you do, but mixes a very good professional photography, all of the things that you learn in photography to make sure that everything looks great, but also making sure that you're not overselling that property. The marketing fits with what the operations can deliver. Okay. So implement Instant Book. Most properties at this point, hopefully, are on Instant Book. All of our properties are. There are 35% of properties that are on VRBO that are not Instant Book. The beauty of that is that by default, even if we don't have any reviews or anything else for a property, but since we are on Instant Book, we will populate above those. So if you're not on Instant Book, please make sure that you click Instant Book. I promise you, you'll be able to vet the guest on the back end of it. And if that guest is not perfect for your property, you can work that out. But if you don't provide Instant Book, you are leaving a lot of money on the table. Choose the right cancellation policy. This changes and ebbs and flows. We will talk a little bit more to this as we get a little bit further in this, but cancellation policy, there's pros and cons to too strict or too lenient. And we can talk a little bit more to that. If you have a question about that, we can go into detail on it. Get good reviews. We talked a lot about reviews. Focus on the guest satisfaction and value. That review section is now not just a guest satisfaction, but it's that value score too. Number 6, learn how to set a cleaning fee that doesn't deter guests. Airbnb, when they made the change for the value score, they also changed how they're showing pricing. They give you 2 different options. It used to be that they only took the rental revenue and divided it by the number of nights, and that was the number that they showed as the daily rate. Well, now they have an option where you can go in and add all the fees except for taxes, and then you can start sorting by the daily rate, including all of the fees. So a lot of these property managers that had the smoke and mirrors gains going on, that it was very low nightly rate, but then they tacked on 40% in fees. Those people are going to be hit very hard. That's something that we absolutely do not do. We are very transparent in our fees and pricing. But this is all stuff that as you move forward, they need to take into account if you are looking to move property management companies or managing it yourself. Learn how to set leveraging dynamic pricing. I won't go too much into dynamic pricing, but it's the exact same way that airlines do their pricing for their different flights. The more that a certain plane gets booked up, the higher that price goes. The lower occupancy inside of that plane, closer to the day of the flight, the more the price drops. So that's a very, very kind of rough way of describing it. There are probably 15 factors that we use here at Live the Gulf Coast to affect our dynamic pricing. But there's number of days out from the current date. We do some gap pricing as well, so that if you've got a 4-day booking through let's say Wednesday, you have another 4-day booking that starts on that following Sunday. There's not 4 days or 4 nights that are in between that, but if you could get 3 nights, would you be willing to give a discount to get we call them orphan dates, to get those orphan dates booked in the middle? Well, in my world, it absolutely makes sense. And most of those dates and most of that pricing is going to be reflective on a daily basis. So what does that mean? Well, it means Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night are going to be about 70% of the rate for the full week. Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night, those are going to be about 30% of the price. So you have 3 nights that are going to be 70%. You have 4 nights that are going to be 30% of the pricing. So if I just book 2 or 3 of those nights for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, then I'm getting that 70% that I was missing out on because my nightly minimum wouldn't allow me to book it. So those orphan dates are huge. And that's been something where we've really been able to sharpen our sales team to really hone in on those orphan dates and maximize the rental potential for your property. Okay, pick the best type of property for your goals. Again, your property currently might not be making the amount of money that you want to make, and we can sit down and talk, set up a meeting together to discuss maybe is this the right property for you, and is there one that maybe makes a little bit more money for a little bit lower cost, and finding out what that perfect mix looks like. Cleanliness, we talked about that before. It impacts your vacation rental ratings. It's we saw it. It's the number 4 item on the importance list is how clean it is. Post COVID, that's become exacerbated a little bit. So just know that that is kind of coming down, but cleanliness is always going to be a factor that guests prioritize. Attracting more guests with only the best amenities. We talked through that. We can go into a little bit more detail if you'd like to set up a meeting. Being pet friendly. There's some statistics on AirDNA that you can make upwards of 50% more every year by just allowing 1 pet in your home. Now, that doesn't mean that every guest is going to bring a pet, but it does make sure that you're not getting left off of that top 5 list if that's an option. And if you're looking at a $6, $7, $8, $9, $10, $12, $15,000 booking, allowing a guest to bring in their golden doodle that doesn't shed, that's 6 or 7 years old, might be worth the potential damage that could happen at the property for you to be able to get that booking. So just something to think about. Benchmark your property's performance. We talked about treating it as a business. That's very important. Knowing what you made last year so that you can improve on those numbers this year. And then be unique. Ideas outside of the box, get more guests. We talked about your niche. What specifically for your property are guests looking for? But also, can you build something that is a kind of a social media focused wall or an area where the guests can start to be marketers for you, and that costs $0. All of that stuff are things that you could do today to make sure that you are benefiting from it 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road. As soon as those pictures are posted with those hashtags or with that tag on that picture, it's there for life. So that's something to keep in mind. So still concerned about the future. I know probably a lot of questions here. I wasn't able to go into everything in excruciating detail, but you can schedule a call to review your property's past performance and future potential. I'd love to talk to anybody. If you manage it yourself, you're looking to buy a property, or you currently own a property and are looking for somebody to manage it, or moving from another management company. I'd love to sit down and talk about past performance, what your future potential is, and be very upfront with you and frank with you on what I think that we can do in a down economy. Find the areas in your calendar that you're missing revenue. This is more focused to the people that are already with a property manager or that manage themselves. When we sit down and talk, that's going to be one of the first things I do is I'll go through and do an analysis of where we missed out on maybe some top end revenue, but maybe where we had our nightly minimum a little high, where if we would have dropped it maybe 3, 4, 5%, that we could have ended up with an additional 10, 15, 20% in rental revenue for the year, which could be the difference in cash flowing or not. Discover the updates that will provide an immediate return on investment and get those scheduled. We talked about them before, but the top 3 renovations that you can do at a property right now is updating your kitchen, updating your bathrooms, and updating your flooring. If you put in a pool or you have a golf cart, those are the only other 2 things that can provide a return on your investment in less than 3 years. So if you have a pool right now in 2022, adding a pool to your property, your payback period on that pool is less than 5 years. For some properties, it's less than 3 years. So that's something to think about. As an investor, what is your payback period for that? And then we talked about the other ones is updating your kitchen, updating your bathrooms, and updating flooring. all of those items. LVP these days for flooring, it's very inexpensive. It is renter tested and kid approved. So making sure that that your property stays intact and looking good, but also making sure that you don't have any damage and you're not having to go back and sand down wood floors and restain and refinish them. All of those things are upkeep costs that, although wood floors look really good, what's maybe an option that provides me that return on investment that maybe isn't as much of a headache into the future. Discuss those suggestions for improving your bottom line, cutting some expenses, looking at what those are. If you are treating it like a business, we can talk about those at an eye level and see where we can cut out some of those bottom line expenses. So if you have any questions, you can visit our Live the Gulf Coast owner website. This is, you can see the URL right there. It's owners.livethegulfcoast.com. And show it to you real quick here. But you can click in here and we've got a lot of information about us. You learn a little bit about our company, what we do, how we do it. But up here at the very top, clicking into the ROI calculator, making sure you click the right property or right area here. We provide a ROI calculator for your property. So for example, we'll take one of our properties that is Sleep 21, it's called Sandcastle by the Sea. It is a 7-bedroom. It is 7 baths, actually 7.5. View quality, it looks out over a lake. It's lakefront with Gulf views. So I think the view quality is pretty amazing, but a 10 is probably going to be a Gulf front view. It being Gulf front with maybe a lakefront view as well is what I would consider a 10, but Gulf front at a minimum for a 10. Location quality, again, on the west end of the beach, very conveniently located to a beach access, conveniently located to, there's a restaurant, Stinky's is right in front of it, Stinky's Fish Camp. Very convenient to be able to go grab drinks, grab some lunch food, and then of course, convenience to the major 30A hubs, like Seaside, Brayton Beach, and Gulf Place, while also having access to Destin and some of the restaurants over there. And then property quality, this one was built about 5 years ago. We've been renting it for 4.5 years. And although it is in very, very good quality and the owners have kept it in tip-top shape, I would put a property quality at a 10 for a new construction or a complete remodel renovation inside and out. So we come down here and we say, okay, so what is it that you made on that property this year? Well, we look at it, and this actually was, we're just under $425,000 in rentals year to date. And that also, we had 3 or 4 weeks that we had cut out for some remodel items and finishing some floors. So there's a little bit more data inside of this, but I think the most important thing is that this is going to give you a realistic estimate on what you can do on your property. And then you say, all right, Davis, well, I'm somewhere between 402 and 445. Can you help me a little bit more with that? I can do a deep dive with you. Just click here, fill out your information, and I'll reach out to you guys and make sure that that I have that information back to you very soon. And you can see what that distribution looks like across the entire months and where we're going to make that money. And then, of course, you can come down here and schedule the call. All right, guys, that's it for me today. I'm going to post the link for this owner's website so you can go in there and do some clicking around and do some looking. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. Our phone number is 850-898-1205, and that extension is extension 3. And then if you're looking to get to our ROI calculator, that is owners with an S .livethegulfcoast.com. And as soon as you click in there, just click the ROI calculator at the very top, and it will take you to the calculator for any more additional questions. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you so much for being here and hanging around. I know we went into a lot of depth, but there's probably some more questions you might have. Please reach out to me, and I'll be able to answer those questions for you. Thanks a lot.